One of the themes you touch on there is the fiduciary role of the board. This is one of those issues that people who are into boards like to talk about fiduciary role and what that means. To much of the rest of the world, I've learned it's one of those amigo issues, and my eyes glaze over. So we talk about fiduciary and others switch off. We kept coming back on it because it really is important. So I want to take a little bit of time in this dialogue to say why that was so important and what it means. And Ian, you really brought this into our conversations. Could you speak up on that one?
Well, thank you. I've served on boards and I've served boards, public sector, private sector. And it is a conversation that good boards have. What does it mean to have a fiduciary responsibility? And as Jane points out, often that's interpreted by the outside world to mean fiscal responsibility or making sure the bottom line of the budget is where you want it to be. In fact, it is a fundamental underpinning of this report and of how good boards or consequential boards operate. Number one, a fiduciary responsibility is a collective effort. So another thing that happens on boards is they can easily break into factions or individuals can dominate boards. But in fact, the power and the voice and the legal status of a board is a collective voice, and that really needs to be restated and understood by boards today. I'd like to broaden that question you posed to the way I came to this commission, and the passion that I feel about reinvigorating fiduciary responsibility relates to my long interest in public policy. And let me just state one obvious thing to lay the context. The obvious thing is we have a diverse, decentralized, self-governed system of higher education in the United States, and that's a great strength. It's actually being modeled by many nations, but it's also, I think at this juncture in our history, a challenge and an opportunity to take on. We have to face, and boards have this responsibility through their fiduciary responsibility, to take on the task of what our societal needs are. Not just what's within the walls of our institution, but how does our institution serve the broader society? We clearly have issues, and we can debate endlessly: income inequality, the declining middle class, et cetera. Higher education is the transformational path to solve many of those problems. And boards, therefore, particularly with states disinvesting so much in the policy voice in higher education because of the changing business model, the voice of the boards becomes ever more important in addressing these collective needs. So I think that understanding fiduciary responsibility and for boards to have a serious conversation about what does that really mean for us, for our institution, and for the needs in our community and our nation that we should be serving, that is, I think, a major plank of our report and something that I feel good about that we've put before the boards, and it's a big challenge.
Brit, did you want to get on that, or?
Indeed, and I think there was a sense on the commission that there is a fundamentally changed circumstance in American higher education today that boards and universities have not come to grips with. We have, in fact, a sort of perfect storm of issues. On the one hand, as was just mentioned, we've seen significant disinvestment of public funds in higher education, which has had a particular impact on our public institutions. And to date, this has largely been addressed by taking short-term actions, including raising tuition at unsustainable rates. So that's an issue that is very much front and center for boards. On the other hand, there is clearly a societal need to expand the capacity of higher education to serve more students. I mean, if we have any hope of sustaining our preeminence as an economic superpower, we've got to have a competitive workforce. and ensuring that we are producing the number and volume of college graduates able to sustain this powerful American economy. And the second issue, and also touched on, if we have any hope in this day and age when higher education is so important, of restoring the American dream for populations of students for whom that American dream has in effect become a nightmare. Serving more low-income and underrepresented minority students has got to be a primary concern of boards and institutions. So our conclusion is that boards must work with institutional leadership to develop more sustainable, long-term fiscal models for our institutions that address this issue of expanded capacity in these difficult fiscal times. And front and center in that has got to be the effort to find lower cost means of delivering high quality education. And so we make a big issue of this need for boards, again, to work with university leadership to come to grips with these changed circumstances. And here's an example where I think the recommendations in the report shouldn't be taken in isolation, but they interact with one another. And it's a whole package of recommendations. And I'm thinking specifically of the issue that Gary just spoke to, and that is the notion of shared governance. There is no way that the kind of change that needs to take place can be done with a top-down mandate. It's got to be through collective action, and that's why it is so important to achieve the kind of change that needs to be made, that we have a strong sense of community engagement and activity, and the role of shared governance in making these changes is going to be critical.